Who invented the song Baby Shark? On the surface level, it looked like a company called Pink Frog created the song about 5 years ago, and it became a viral phenomenon. Actually, it was much older than that. I guess it didn't matter because Pink Frog made it a hit again, and merchandising soon followed. My daughter has been begging for one of their big stuffed plushies. And because I'm a single mom trying my hardest to keep my kids entertained while stuck at home, of course I complied with that. It was easy enough to grab one from Amazon and get it shipped straight to my door. My daughter was immediately in love with it, taking it everywhere around the house and constantly squeezing it to hear the song play. I will admit there were quite a few long sighs involved as she did this about a dozen times. Any parent will tell you, yes, despite how catchy the tune is, it does get annoying after the 300th time. But I'm a patient mom. I figured that the stuffed animal would eventually just lose battery life, so I did my best to ignore it and go about my day as usual. When night came, I told her that Sharky would need to rest too, and surprisingly, she didn't put up a fight. I tugged at the tail to turn off the song, just like the instructions said, but nothing happened. It just kept doing the jingle. My daughter giggled and said, "Sharky must not want to go to sleep." "Well, even if that's true, you have a Zoom teacher meeting tomorrow, so I will have to make you go to sleep anyway," I told her. She pouted and I hummed the shark song, changing the lyrics to say, "Go to sleep, do 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 do, go to sleep, do 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 do, go to sleep, do 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 do." She giggled and laid down, asking me what I had planned to do with her stuffed shark. "I'll check the manual and get him to rest. Don't want to wear out the batteries," I promised as she turned over for bed. I took the stuffed animal to my bedroom and tried a few more times to squeeze the trigger to make the noise stop, but again, nothing seemed to work. My next troubleshooting solution was to see what people said to do online. It's probably just cheaply made, I told myself as I read a slew of bad reviews. Maybe I can just get her a new one. Or take the sound box out, I mumbled as I rubbed my sleepy eyes. In the background, I could hear the terrible song play over and over. Baby shark doo 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 doo, baby shark doo 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 doo, baby shark. Throw away doo 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 doo, throw away doo 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 doo, throw away. I turned toward the shark, thinking I had misheard and picked it up. Run away doo 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 doo, run away doo 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 doo, run away, the singing toy now said. I rolled my eyes and tossed it down, returning to my Google search. "I wish I could get away from you," I teased as I shut everything down for the night. "No escape, doo 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 doo, no escape, doo 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 doo, no escape," the toy responded. That made me stop and actually really pay attention to the next lyrics. "You'll be sorry, doo 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 doo, you'll be sorry, doo 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 doo, you'll be sorry," the shark said. "What the hell?" I said to myself, thinking I had lost my mind. I decided to go ahead and take the sound box out, thinking that this had to be my sleepy brain playing tricks with me. I went to the kitchen to get a knife as it kept singing, this time with normal lyrics, but much louder. "Well, sorry, Sharky, but some of us actually do need sleep," I said as I found a good knife and was about to cut at the stuffing when I heard my daughter make a squeal. "Mommy, what are you doing?" she said, snatching the stuffed animal away from me. "Sweetie, I just need to turn it off for the night. Don't worry, I won't hurt Sharky. We can get Grandma to sew him up. He's broken," I told her. "He is lying, doo 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 doo, he is lying, doo 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 doo, he is lying," the stuffed animal said. She glared at me and squeezed the toy harder. "You were trying to hurt her. You're a monster!" she screamed. "Sweetie, just give me the toy," I said with a sigh. "Run away, doo 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 doo, run away, doo 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 doo, run away," the toy instructed her, and to my surprise, she listened, running to her room and slamming the door closed. I sighed in frustration, following after her. "Open this door right now," I told her. "No! You will take Sharky away!" she screamed. "I promise I won't," I said, rolling my eyes and wishing I had never taught her how to lock doors. I didn't want to call the landlord to come this late and unlatch a door over a stupid stuffed toy. "Please, sweetie, it's late. Sharky needs sleep. So do you. Just open the door and I promise I won't hurt him. I will even let you sleep with him, okay?" I said with a long sigh. Judge me for my parental skills later, but I just wanted this ridiculous little tantrum to be over and get to bed. "Promise?" she squeaked. "Yes, I pinky swear." She slowly unlatched the door, holding her toy so tight I thought she would make the stuffing burst out. I showed her my hands were empty and I wasn't going to hurt the annoying toy, and then obliged her by tucking her into bed. "Go to sleep, do, go to sleep, do, go to sleep," I said, kissing her forehead. The toy seemed to mimic me, citing the final lyric. "Safe at last, do, safe at last, do, safe at last." Then I went to bed too, hoping that the constant lyrics wouldn't keep her awake and resolving to handle the broken toy in the morning. I honestly didn't get much sleep myself though, too worried about how the strange toy was. Surely I wasn't the only one that had bizarre things said by their toy. I wanted to be rational, and so my sleep-deprived brain told me to go online and see if other people also cited any weird things happening around their toy. A few forums I found encouraged users to check out an apparently hidden website that told about secret messages in the lyrics. It sounded like a goofy conspiracy theory, like that one way back in my day about playing music backwards to hear the devil. Still, your brain convinces you to believe things at night, and I looked into it. The results were terrifying. Children self-harming because the toy told them to, or killing their pets, setting fire to their homes, being brainwashed to be slaves to the toy, to make their parents go to jail. It was enough to make me jump out of bed and decide that I needed to just get rid of the stuffed toy immediately. I could hear my daughter snoozing softly as I peeked into her room, surprised to find that the toy had finally gone silent. Maybe the batteries had died at long last. Still, I didn't want to take a risk and decided to go ahead and do the deed of tossing it out. I snuck over to her bedside and reached over to take the toy. Instinctively, I squeezed its tail, but no lyrics played. Sighing in relief, I started to leave the room and went to the kitchen to grab the knife. I had to be sure this was just some glitch in the system. As I opened the toy, I reached in to take out the electronics. Except it wasn't a sound box at all. It was a camera. My whole body froze as I realized that whoever owned this had been using it to spy on my daughter. I immediately tossed it into the garbage and then threw up. I took Sharky back to bed and tried to get some sleep, certain that the worst was over now that I had discovered what this sicko was doing. I messaged the manufacturer to warn them of how the toy was being exploited. Then somehow, despite all the weirdness of the night and the occasional garbled jingle from the garbage, I got to sleep. I was most worried about how to explain this to my daughter. She was already in love with this toy so much. But that worry never manifested, because when I got to her room to wake her up, I was mortified to see that my daughter was gone. In her place was a stuffed shark doll and a note. I checked the house first. The front door was wide open. Someone had broken in and kidnapped her. The same someone I was sure that had been monitoring us via the toy. Then, as my head spun and I tried not to panic, I read the note. "Squeeze me," it said. As my hands shook, I reached for the tail of the toy. "Ran away, do, ran away, do, ran away. Won't come back, do, won't come back, do, won't come back." And one final jingle to taunt me as I tried to not sob. "Mine at last, do, mine at last, do, mine at last." When my daughter Anna entered middle school, I knew there were going to be some drastic changes. Besides just going into a new facility or learning a locker combination, I expected to start hearing her ask about boys, to be exposed to more foul language, and to want more freedom. She's always been a bit of a rebel, and now with hormones raging, I've seen her transform into a punk goth girl. But what I didn't expect to change was the standard curriculum handed out by her teachers. Maybe that was wishful thinking, but see, I have always enjoyed helping with her homework assignments whenever I could. Although recently my stepson Jeremy also likes to get involved. Since the divorce, I've tried to be equal to both of them, despite their differences. "Why can't it just be us, Dad?" Anna asked, but I reminded her that wouldn't be fair. She claimed she was okay with it as long as we were together. I noticed, though, after the first or second week at school, her assignments weren't what you would call normal. For example, she was doing a history paper on Vlad the Impaler, and the task was to replicate what sort of stake the draconian leader might have used as a weapon in battle. She told me they even insisted that she made a paper-mache skull to add to the realism of the model. I'm sure you can imagine how strange it was to bundle up together old pieces of newspaper and make them resemble a human head. But I figured that maybe the teacher had a flair for the dramatic and I didn't question it much. Jeremy teased Anna as she did the work, causing her to get frustrated and then remark, "You better be glad I don't use your head, Jer." He shut up after that and just watched in morbid fascination. Meanwhile, I did my best to praise the finished product, but afterward did admit to myself it was rather strange. Fast forward to a few weeks later and she had a biology experiment where she was asked to dissect a dead animal. Again, I assume this was something similar to what I did as a kid using a frog, so I didn't object. The only thing I found a bit disturbing really was Anna had to capture a living animal first for the assignment. My daughter has never been one to take school lightly though, so she did her due diligence and caught one the next day. I remember trying my best to smile in approval as she cut open the wriggling amphibian and it finally died. Afterward, the rest of the experiment went off without a hitch, and I was actually pretty proud of my daughter for not complaining about such a grisly task. In fact, the only thing she was bothered by was Jeremy following her around like a stray puppy. "Why couldn't you go with your mom?" she asked. I gave her an ugly look and told her not to be so mean. I just wanted to keep the peace. And it wasn't until the third time a peculiar task was given to her that I really began to worry. She told me that the shop teacher was asking the entire class to make life-sized coffins in honor of Halloween and that they had a week to complete it, dig a hole, and then photograph a family member in the coffin in the hole. It didn't seem right, such specific and dark instructions for a group of 13-year-olds. Anna got upset when I questioned it and stormed off to get started herself while I decided to make a phone call to her school. Ordinarily, I don't interfere when it comes to this sort of thing, but the sheer amount of bizarre schoolwork she had been getting was putting me on edge. Something didn't feel right about any of it. "Richmond Academics?" the secretary said once I got a real person on the line. "Yes, this is the father of Anna Sherbert. I was needing to set up a conference with some of her teachers," I told them. The secretary asked if everything was all right, and I did my best to reassure them that it was. Meanwhile, in the backyard, I heard Anna pulling apart wood beams that I had stacked in my old shed, trying to find the right ones for her assignment. After I had set up an appointment for the next day, I went outside and voiced my concerns again. "Dad, you're just being lazy. It's just schoolwork. I don't want to get an F," Anna objected. Jeremy even offered to help her. She gave in with a sigh. I didn't want to seem like I was being some kind of helicopter parent, so I didn't object to them continuing even though it did bother me. On the way to her school the next day, I seriously did consider turning around and forgetting the whole thing, but the fact that my daughter had stayed up almost till 11 at night to finish the model coffin, resulting in her getting sick, made me decide enough was enough. Only two of Anna's teachers were actually able to meet me at the principal's office, her science teacher and the history professor that had first started this whole ordeal. I thanked them for taking a break from their busy schedule to hear my concerns and then put it to them straight. "I just don't understand why it is that you've been having these children participate in such, well, to put it bluntly, dreadful activity," I told them. I remember seeing a bit of confusion dance across their face. "Mr. Sherbert, I appreciate your concerns, but I'm afraid you have us at a disadvantage. Just which assignments are you talking about?" the history teacher asked. "There's no need to play dumb. I'm talking about the dissection, the makeshift impaler weapon. It's gone to the extreme in terms of bizarre," I said in frustration. The science teacher shook her head and responded, "There hasn't been a single experiment like that in my class all year." The history teacher also said the same. I remember leaving the school feeling a tad perplexed. If the teachers didn't assign Anna the homework, then why was she doing it? A few stray things she had said about her stepbrother started to fall into place. Suddenly I was jumping into my car and speeding toward home. I must have called the house line at least 20 times before I got there, but there was no response. I made it inside the kitchen, calling her and Jeremy's name. Then I saw a shadow flicker in the kitchen and Anna standing there just staring at me. "Anna, thank God. I was so worried." I paused as I saw dirt on her legs and ankles. "Where is Jeremy?" She kept staring like she was numb to what had happened. I looked toward the backyard and ran. Fresh dirt was covering up a small hole near to the shed, and a shovel lay alongside it. I grabbed and started to dig, desperate to save my son. After digging down for about 5 feet, I hit the makeshift coffin Anna had made and pried it open. I saw Jeremy laying there, arms crossed over his exposed chest. It was clear from the uneven cuts on his chest that she had also tried to remove his vital organs before shoving him into the hole. And his open, shocked eyes were staring straight at me, telling me she had impaled him before burying him alive. I climbed out and looked at my daughter again, shaking with fear. "Anna, why?" She gave me the most dead stare in the world. "Maybe now you'll have more time for me." I don't know if sharing it with others will ease my conscience or not, but it's the only peace I think I might be able to find. It was a late summer night and this guy named Jeremy called to report a crime. Well, honestly, I don't know for sure if there's a crime to report or not exactly. It's just, a lot of odd behavior from my roommate has made me feel on edge. I asked them exactly what was going on. They started to ramble about their roommate, a college frat named Mike that apparently liked to sleep around with all of the dorm girls. Last month I swear it was a different girl every single night. I'm not trying to sound jealous here, but he has a way with women. He's an excellent cook, too. I wasn't sure how that was relevant, but they explained that they really noticed the odd behavior after one girl in particular ran out of the roommate's bedroom screaming and calling him disgusting. There was nothing wrong with that, of course, but the way she acted, it sounded like it was worse than his performance in the bedroom. She was scared, and my roommate was furious and chased after her. The strangest part of all, I never saw her on campus again. That made me start to ask around about his other girls. I guess I've never really been home when they left, but it made me wonder if there were complaints. I didn't really want to lose my dorm just because he was being a jerk. When I started asking people about his old flames, I noticed a consistent trend. Alex, one of his former teammates, said that Mike had dated 6 girls and none of them were ever seen on campus again. I got a few names and, well, I called the registry. Alex was right. Those girls aren't students here anymore. I told him I didn't understand how that really relates to his roommate. Maybe it was just one-night stands with girls that were getting ready to leave the college. I didn't see a problem. I was trying to use typical tactics to calm him down and move on to a different caller. Well, see, I thought that too until I got home early today from class. I was sick. Anyway, that doesn't matter because when I got here, Mike was surprised to see me. He was lugging this heavy black trash bag that stunk. Like, it was awful. And there was a dark stain on the floor where he had dragged it over toward the garbage chute. Long story, but we have one in the middle of our building. It's like an old thing meant for laundry, but now it just goes to an incinerator. Before he could continue, I heard a noise in the background, like someone banging on a wooden door. "Where exactly are you now, Jeremy?" I remember asking. Then I heard a voice in the background shouting for him to open the door. Jesus, that's him. I knew this would happen. "Look, can you send someone or not? I swear to you that he's going to kill me." I was hesitant. All he had told me so far sounded like it could just be a coincidence. Nothing to say that Mike was in danger, but I kept hearing that pounding noise and finally agreed to get his address. But that was too late, unfortunately. The noises on the other end of the phone line became overwhelming and I heard signs of a struggle, glass breaking, someone shouting. Then the phone rang full of static and a new voice came on the line. "Who is this?" they asked. I told them my name was Lisa and that their roommate had called emergency services. I even lied and said that operators had traced the call. I didn't want something bad to happen to Jeremy, but unfortunately for me, the roommate called my bluff. "You don't have that capability. Trust me, I've been through this song and dance before with my last stupid roommate." He paused and I heard a sharp groan like he was pulling Jeremy closer to the phone. "I never thought you were smart enough to call the cops on me, but I guess I underestimated you," Mike said. "There are body parts in that bag," Jeremy shouted. He tried to give me the address, but I heard Mike slam his fist in his face and I guessed Jeremy went unconscious. "You said your name is Lisa?" Mike said, his voice as cold as ice. It sounded like all emotion had drained from his soul. "Mike, don't do anything you're going to regret," I remember telling them. "I have a lot of regrets, but what I do with these girls, It gives me pleasure when I chop up their bodies and then I put them in the food I serve. You hear that, Jeremy? I served you people every single meal, and you never even knew, Mike shouted. Jeremy didn't respond, of course, and I wasn't sure he was alive. I soon found out that he was, but it didn't last very long. I'll be right back, Lisa. I want you to hear what's going to happen to my stupid roommate because he thought that he could stop me. Mike put the phone down and I kept trying to call out to Jeremy. You have to tell me your address, please. I can get people there fast, I told him. I didn't hear a sound. Then I heard a grunt at last and Jeremy was choking out a few simple words. He told me where the college was at and what dorm they were in, and I told him I would stay on the line as police got there. It sucks that I have to kill you, Jeremy. I hate killing men. They lack flavor. When I taste a woman's flesh, it sends me to nirvana. It makes me feel that I am a god, Mike said as he returned. I heard screams fill the air as something sharp pierced Jeremy. It sounded like Mike was using a chainsaw. I think I will just incinerate you. Dump your useless body into the fire where no one ever find even a speck of you, Mike said. Somehow, he also remembered the phone was still connected, and he held it next to his face. You still there, Lisa? Is this turning you on? Police are almost there, Mike. You're going to be arrested, I told him. My threat didn't even faze him. I hope that means we get to see each other soon, Lisa. I think you would be a fun little dish to have. First, I would sleep with you, then drug you, then sleep with you again until I was satisfied, and then eat every last bit of your body up. First, I would devour your legs. He kept rambling as he cut up Jeremy's body, and I had to hear every second of this evil. Finally, he turned the saw off, and I heard him tossing body parts into bags. Lisa, I'm going to have to go now. I think this college scene isn't for me anymore. Then he dropped the phone. I think I held my breath until first responders got there. There was a mountain of evidence in the dorm, my supervisor later told me. Mike had even included a video camera hidden in the wall to document his sick fetish of evil. The evidence would put him away for life, had he not gotten away. We spread the word on campus and in the local area about him, but somehow Mike had slipped away. It still keeps me awake at night to think that he was fantasizing about eating me as well. I have decided that he isn't even worthy of being considered a human, just a monster that wears human skin. I know this sounds especially morbid, but I hope one day I get a different 911 call that tells me where Mike is at. Stop his reign of terror. Stop this evil from hurting others. Next time, I won't hesitate. Next time, he will regret taunting me. Organ donation is a profitable business if you can survive. I saw the ad on this dark web page that I shouldn't have been on. The innocent imagery had a sinister truth. He'll come for you when you're in need, but beware, if you want pay, you will bleed. I was behind on my car payments and my SUV was about to be repossessed. The unemployment benefits had lapsed and rent was due. I needed cash, and I needed it fast. Sad thing is, I've been in bad shape for a while now. Sold jewelry and hawked electronics to any pawn shop within a 50-mile radius, but I had nothing to barter with. Nothing left to keep me from completely drowning in the misery that I called life, except for my own flesh and blood. I'd heard whispers, chatter amid old 4chan forums, that organ donation on the dark web was one way to get money fast. The street surgeon, the ad said, would willingly take any organs that you could afford to give up and pay top dollar. Most of the time, I'm not one to believe weird ads about back alley deals and dirty money, but in this case, I was desperate. I needed what this guy could offer me. I'm married with a kid on the way. Money is tight, probably a little tighter than I want it to be if I'm being honest. I wish I had never moved to this damn city. We live in a crime-heavy neighborhood, and I was desperate to keep my wife and child safe. I thought if I could get fast cash, we could finally have a better life. The ad said the street surgeon shows up when you need him the most. Maybe this was a sign. I just had to be willing to take a risk. I clicked on the latest sighting, a grainy picture taken near the docks, and felt a shudder run up and down my spine as I saw a white-green smock gleam in the shiny Polaroid. There was no mistaking it. Whoever was making this ad was making sure it looked authentic.
Suddenly, a pop-up ad emerged from the corner of the browser, asking if I wanted to set up an appointment. I signed the waiver. I didn't read the terms and conditions. An email came only 1 minute later, no time to second guess. A time and a place, that very night, for the deed to be done. A stipulation to be on time or the appointment would be lost. What did I have left to lose? Just my body. But my family needs fed. I managed to squeeze out a favor from a cousin to drive me where I was told to go, an empty parking lot on the south side of town. You want me to just leave you here? They asked. They didn't understand what I had come here to do. I only had a few dollars to my name and gave it to them for gas money. I kept repeating that mantra, nothing to lose, everything to gain. My cousin reluctantly took the money and insisted I keep a little change so I could make an emergency call if needed. Then I was alone with only a street light to comfort me. The air in the alley felt thick with regret and dread. As I stood there, shuffling my feet and waiting, my mind wondered if this was just a sick joke, someone luring me out here to kill me. Then I saw the surgeon. They opened an old warehouse door and shouted my name to come as due. Part of me still felt that I was losing my mind, placing my hopes and dreams in the hands of a criminal. When he did appear, I think I found myself choking back a scream. He had not been there in the fog a moment before. He was keeping up appearances to be an urban legend, and his smock smelled of blood and sweat, enough to make me vomit as I entered the building. Tonight, I anticipated that I would be tortured beyond measure. A short explanation was given to me, followed by the most excruciating pain in my life. The surgeon asked why I was there. I told him I was a desperate man with nowhere else to turn. I looked down at my feet, shaking like a twig, then up again to be startled by the appearance of 2 nurses that strapped me down. No anesthesia was going to be used. Why would it be? There was nothing important about me except extracting my organs for some paying customer. Then I saw the door behind me open again, and the surgeon called another name. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't anticipate that the person I was giving my organs to would be here as well. They were on a table alongside me, and clearly from the other side of the tracks, a life that I only dreamed about. The surgeon was careful with them, making sure that they had the proper medicine before the procedure began. "So that's what this is? You're selling our skin to these fat pigs?" I shouted. The surgeon and his team seemed amused. Poor people are always the ones that come to our doors, and the rich are the ones that don't want to leave a paper trail. They just want to live longer, and they'll pay any price for that, even if it means taking life from someone else, he said. The nurse took a scalpel and cut across my stomach. I felt the cold blade and screamed. They stuffed a rag in my mouth. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" The surgeon laughed. I watched as they began to take out my pancreas. I could feel their hands pushing aside my intestines, and the second nurse was using a suction device to keep me from bleeding to death. I wanted to black out from the procedure. This is what I signed up for, I thought miserably as I writhed in pain. I told myself it would all be worth it for the payday that waited at the end. The surgeon held the organ up and playfully showed it to me as I shook in agony. Then they began to place it in the paying client. Their medicine had already put them to sleep, and they were ushered out of the building with little concern. I was alone in a dark room again, thinking that I was proud of myself for pushing through the pain. Then the door opened again. A second client came in, this one as blind as a bat in a wheelchair. I tried to shake my head and tell them I was done, but the surgeon didn't care about my needs. Instead, they took their tools and forced my eyelids open. A needle forced its way into my pupil as I writhed and shouted for them to stop. I couldn't see anything for the next few moments, but I could feel them pulling at my eyes, the nerves of my optical cortex pulsing again and again until at last I felt a sharp blade cut them in half. I was blind in one eye, permanently scarred by this brutal criminal, and the blind client eagerly accepted my organ like a child waiting for a new shiny toy. I gasped and shook more and more, trying to get the attention of the nurse, but there was one more procedure to be done. The final client needed a new hand, theirs lost in a war or a gunfight from long ago. I never got the details. It was clear, though, that they had paid millions for the surgeon to amputate my hand, and I was powerless to stop the madness as the blade cut through my skin and another part of my body was taken away. It was so excruciating that I finally blacked out. When I did wake up, I was in the alleyway, stumbling and trying to cling to what little life I had left. I used the money my cousin gave me to call him. When he came to get me, he insisted I needed to go to the ER, but I kept shaking my head no. I had to keep pushing if I was going to get what I wanted. I stayed at his place that night, recovering from the life-altering surgery. Without my right eye and my left hand, I felt like I was going to die. Somehow I survived, and then, best of all, I got a notification that my payment was sent. At last, my family could start a new life. My wife was horrified when she saw what had happened to me. She was angry and left for her parents. She couldn't believe I had done something so crazy. I tried to explain it was for our future, but she didn't want to listen to me. She claimed I lost my sanity and my morality. All my work, all my sacrifice. It felt like it had been for nothing. The only thing left was anger and rage toward the surgeon. So I have booked another appointment, this time using that dirty money I just got from him to request my organs back. I'm an idiot for thinking this change would alter my life. All it's done is reveal an ugliness about the world that I should have seen all along. I'm a tech reviewer living in Chicago. Earlier this month, I received a review copy of Apple's new iOS 14 on my iPhone. One of the new features that came with iOS 14 is called sound recognition. When activated, the software activates the user's microphone to identify sounds that would be useful for a person who's deaf or wearing headphones. The phone can identify a dozen or so different sounds, including sirens, doorbells, and the sound of water running, amongst others. I wanted to see how well the feature worked, so I turned it on and went about my day. After I rode my bike into the office where I work, I checked my phone and saw a few notifications from the app that looked like this. Car horn, 15 minutes ago. A sound has been recognized that may be a car horn. Dog barking, 16 minutes ago. A sound has been recognized that may be a dog barking. I thought that was pretty cool. I'd heard both the car and the dog on my bike ride to work. The next two notifications threw me off though. Shouting, 18 minutes ago. A sound has been recognized that may be a person shouting. Shouting, 18 minutes ago. A sound has been recognized that may be a person shouting. It's not like it would have been overly strange if I'd heard shouting. I live in Chicago after all, but I hadn't. I'd been actively listening throughout the whole ride, and I definitely hadn't heard anything that could be called shouting. At the end of the day, I turned the sound settings back on and took the same path home. This time when I got home, I saw a few similar notifications. A siren from an ambulance, a few car horns, and 3 more notifications of shouting. I was baffled. I'd been specifically listening for something that might be misidentified as shouting and heard nothing, so I decided to pull on my detective hat. I knew from my phone's display that the shouting had been recorded at 5:23 p.m. I also knew that Google Maps records its users' locations at all times. All I had to do was go check exactly where I'd been when the sound had been recorded. I opened my laptop, flipped over to my timeline on Google Maps, and scrolled to the time that the shouting had apparently been recorded on my phone. There. I had been biking along a 50-foot section of road during the 2 minutes that my phone had recorded the shouting. I zoomed in, looking for an elementary school, a playground, anything that could explain what I'd recorded. When I saw what I'd passed, I sat back shaking my head. The only thing on the other side of that section of the sidewalk was an old cemetery. No way, I said to myself. There's gotta be... No way! I trailed off, staring down at my phone. I switched apps and ordered some takeout, still thinking hard. It was way too strange a coincidence for me to just dismiss, though. Were there mourners inside the cemetery? Even if there were, why would they be shouting? And why hadn't I heard them? I was still thinking through possibilities when my doorbell rang with my food. My phone buzzed, I looked down and read, "Doorbell, just now. A sound has been recognized that may be a doorbell." I turned off the feature before getting to my feet and grabbing my food. I decided I had to go back to the cemetery and see if there was something there that my phone could mistake for shouts. By the time I'd biked back out there, it was already dark. The cemetery was old by most standards, with a winding concrete path that split it in two, connecting the 2 city streets on either side. I rode into the middle of the cemetery, hopped off my bike, and took a few steps into the grass. The cemetery was old and poor. The city still probably paid someone to cut the grass, but they hadn't come out for more than a month. I was confused at how quiet the night was. If you've ever been in a big city like Chicago or New York, You know that it's almost never silent. You'll always be hearing the sound of a car horn off in the distance, or someone playing their music, as if the rest of us want to hear it too. Tonight was different, though. Standing in that cemetery, it was as if a hush had fallen over this corner of the city. Even the leaves around me were still. I hovered my finger over the app, suddenly unsure if I should turn it on. Curiosity overcame my hesitation, and I activated the feature. My phone immediately began to buzz. Shouting, just now. A sound has been recognized that may be a person shouting. Shouting, just now. A sound has been recognized that may be a person shouting. I was at a complete loss. There was nothing for my phone to misinterpret. I walked up to a nearby tombstone and turned on my phone's light to read the names. An infant son had been buried with its mother and father sometime in the early 1950s. My phone continued to buzz. I looked down at the new notifications. Baby crying, just now. A sound has been recognized as a baby crying. Shouting, just now. A sound has been recognized that may be a person shouting. Baby crying, just now. A sound has been recognized that may be a baby crying. I crouched down in front of the grave, steadying myself against it to try to get a picture of the names. That's when I felt a small, pudgy hand wrap around the pinky finger on my left hand. It was warm and wet, like the hand of an infant. I fell on my back, staring at the tombstone. I skittered back along the tall grass of the cemetery and saw I was still utterly, completely alone. At least, it seemed that way. My phone continued to buzz. I ran, picked up my bike, and rode out of there as fast as I could. Your name is Dylan. Dylan Richard Thomas. I knew that the person on the other end of the chat was just trying to scare me, but I wasn't going to be frightened so easily. This whole thing started as a dare less than a week ago. My best friend Cal told me that if I could prove that this psychic was fake, he would pay me $100. Even now, our conversation was fresh in my mind. All psychics do is read the room. They pick up on body language, different tells that people have. It's just a different form of communication. Plus, you can't tell me in this day and age they don't do background checks on all their clients, I told him. The whole world is just a click away. I bet I could go on your browser history right now and find out things about you that nobody else ever knew. Cal was the type that couldn't turn down a good bet, so he decided to call my bluff. Go online, talk to the psychic, and you will see that this one is the real deal. It really changed my whole life, Cal told me. Of course, he had a few requirements before I logged on. You've never been on the dark web before, so I'm going to set you up a brand new connection. That means no traceable data that will link back to your old hard drive. It's for your own protection anytime you're online, you know, Cal told me. I rolled my eyes, but didn't object to anything that he wanted to do. I figured this would be the easiest $100 I've ever made. About an hour later, he had created a dummy email, provided me a private connection, and told me where to go to find the psychic. How can I be sure that you won't give him the heads up? You whisper all my secrets and this bet would be lost before we even begin, I pointed out. Cal agreed to let me hold on to his cell and his laptop to prevent him from contacting the psychic and told me I had 24 hours. Don't make excuses. Just do it. I told him I would. Honestly, the whole thing felt like it was going to be a walk in the park. I've been able to pick up on scams and cons for as long as I can remember. It's partially the reason that I got myself into the work of risk management at our business. There was no way this psychic would pull a fast one on me. That night, I got online as promised and made sure everything was secure. According to the network that Cal had made, my fake name was for a woman. Clever misdirection, I thought. I typed in the website address and found myself waiting in a silent, almost dead chat room. Maybe I had come at a bad time? Then a small camera popped up and a message requested if they could turn on their webcam. I knew that meant they hoped I would turn on mine as well and likely try to read some body cues I subconsciously gave off, so I declined and kept on the text chat. I'm a private person, I typed out. It was a flimsy excuse, but if they were as talented as Cal claimed, it wouldn't be an issue. Of course, I understand. My apologies. Call me Mr. Marvin at your service, the psychic responded. The pleasure is all mine, I said. So tell me, what brings you to my neck of the woods? Marvin asked. Baiting for information was a sloppy tactic. I knew most people would likely fall for that right away. You tell me, I answered with a soft smirk. Marvin didn't miss a beat either. Feisty, are we? I suppose that is fair. But clearly you didn't come here by mere coincidence. Someone guided you here. Not like I pass out flyers. Alright, enough is enough. If you're as psychic as you claim, then do a cold reading. I don't have all night, I told them. Marvin wasn't about to be underestimated, so he typed exactly what I didn't expect. My name. For a second, when I saw Dylan Thomas appear on screen, I panicked. It wasn't possible, but I wasn't going to let on that they were right. I still wanted to prove my point. Is that it? I asked. You're not giving me much to work with. Do you think being a psychic is like magic? They responded. I decided to stop pretending and be blunt. I think it's like being a con artist. You cheat people into believing your lies just to make them feel good, I said. So tell me how you really feel, Marvin said. Look, it's clear that you aren't going to really prove to me that you're a psychic, so just drop the act. I'm going to screenshot this and end the conversation. Before I give my reading? Marvin asked. Are you even going to? You've been beating around the bush forever now, I typed back. It's fine to be frightened, you know. Sometimes there are things that you simply can't control, he said. It suddenly felt like the tone of the conversation had changed. I'm not scared, just a born skeptic, I replied. Because of what happened with your mother? This time, I couldn't even respond. I literally stood up and shut off the computer, pacing the room. Impossible. It was impossible that he knew anything about that. There had to be an explanation. I went to Cal the next day, demanding an explanation. So they got to you, did they? He said with a chuckle. This isn't funny, man. I want to know what's going on. How did they know about my mom? I asked. Now Cal was the one that was a bit disturbed. Whoa, that was like 15 years ago. There's no way they could have found that information online, he said. Did you say something? I asked. Dude, you have my cell and laptop. I pushed past them and checked their small apartment, turning over cushions and trying to find anything to prove they had accessed the internet. What are you going to do now? Cal asked as I finished my search. I stormed past them, using my cell phone to access the site again, demanding answers from Marvin. I was wondering where you went, the psychic texted. I need to know what you know about my mom, I typed back. I suppose from your point of view it would be considered magic, Marvin answered. I texted back as fast as I could, getting into my car. My mother died because someone was stalking my family. I changed my name to get away, so don't play games with me. You need to tell me what you know. There was a short pause as I drove down the main road, then my phone pinged. I know everything about the real you, Stephen. My birth name. I nearly had a wreck as I swerved to avoid traffic, my heart racing and filled with panic. I could hardly breathe. I got home and locked every door. Marvin wasn't about to go away though. Just like me, he wanted to prove a point. Did you really think that this was all coincidental? First, your friend somehow has a cold reading on a dark web psychic page and then dares you to do the same? My hands felt colder than ice. It couldn't be the same person that had been stalking my mother. How did you find me? I asked back. I've never stopped looking for you. You have to understand, the moment your mother died was the end of my life. I lost you, my chance at happiness. I sacrificed everything to find you again. The messages were becoming more persistent as I heard noises outside my house. Someone was there. I've studied you, Stephen. I know that you lost your faith when your mother died. You don't believe in psychics or God or anything, Marvin said. By the time I'm through with you, though, that will change. One of my windows shattered, a dark figure entering my house. I did the only thing I could think of and ran to my bedroom, locking that door as well. I had no means of protection, nowhere to run. I thought maybe the key code on the door might keep them away. But a few simple finger strokes and I was face to face with the stalker that had killed my mother and driven me to hide for the past decade. Marvin smiled, seeing the fear in my eyes as I trembled. What happens now? I asked, barely able to catch my breath. My blood ran cold as he closed the door, keeping me from running as he responded. I'm no psychic, but I'm betting this is the part where you die. I grabbed the closest object I could find and bashed him over the head. I had survived his attempt to hunt me down. I called the police and told them what happened. Then I contacted my friend. There was one answer I needed that still didn't satisfy me. You were a part of this somehow. You knew about my stalker. Cal, how did you know? I asked them. Some people don't need a psychic reading to figure out. You seem like an easy mark, he said with a shrug. I should turn you over to the cops, I said, but it was my word against his. I hated that he had conned me to be his friend and then lured me to my stalker. If I learned anything at all, it's that I couldn't trust anyone.
Come on, bro, just download it. There's so many hot girls on this app, Mark pleaded, swiping through a barrage of attractive women to prove his point. Look, I just matched with one. I'm telling you, dude, it works. I had always been leery of dating sites, but I'd be lying if I said my curiosity wasn't piqued. I don't know, man. Kinder, it's an obvious Tinder knockoff. Plus, I don't know if I'm ready to put myself back out there just yet. Mara really screwed me up, I retorted, hoping that not-so-subtle jab at my ex would thwart his attempts to persuade me. Okay, how long has it been now? 6 months? You gotta move on. You're a great guy, and any girl will be lucky to have you. Just because you picked one bad apple from the bunch doesn't mean they're all rotten. Pulling at my heartstrings, you sly bastard. I'll consider it, alright? Yeah, you won't regret it, Jason. I downloaded the app later that night. I was honestly giddy to test it out. If it worked as well as Mark said it did, I'd be elated. Though I'd never admit it to him, the loneliness was beginning to take a toll on me. Mark was right. It was time to move on. I selected a handful of photos that I thought I looked decent in, hurriedly scrolling past the wall of pictures of Mara and me that I hadn't had the heart to delete. Looking at them always sent a pang of grief jolting through my heart, a constant reminder of the mess I'd made. But it was over. I couldn't change the past, only the future. So with that notion at the forefront of my mind, I steeled my resolve and finally deleted any remaining photos of my ex-girlfriend from my camera roll. After a week, I was a bit underwhelmed at the modest number of girls I'd match with. When I was fortunate enough to kick off an interesting conversation, it usually fizzled out after a day or so. Give it time. You just got back in the game after 2 years of being off the market. You gotta give yourself a chance to learn how to talk to girls again, Mark advised. Here, let me see your phone. I'll try to give you some pointers to set you in the right direction. I sheepishly handed it to him. Come on, dude. You can't simp over these girls. Hey, you're really pretty isn't gonna get you anywhere. Okay, what do you start off with then, Johnny Sins? I start off with a cheesy pickup line. Sometimes it makes them laugh, and it's not a bad way to break the ice. Which one do you use? I queried, hoping to pilfer his. I start off with, are you a parking ticket? Because you have fine written all over you. But you can't steal mine. You have to find your own, he smirked. Ugh, fine. I'll see what Google has to offer. After perusing the internet's bountiful selection of awful pickup lines, I settled on a mildly corny one and began to implement it. The pickup line did little to bolster my already lacking self-esteem. I was feeling dejected, nearly ready to give up on the app altogether, when a notification lit up my screen. Kinder, you got a match. My heart fluttered. I hurriedly typed in my passcode and opened the dating app. New match, Jessica. I started swiping through her pictures. Jessica was drop-dead gorgeous. I had no recollection of ever coming across her profile in the first place, but I knew I had to make a move on her. All right, Jay, you got this, I muttered. With nothing original coming to mind, I copy-pasted the pickup line from my latest failed conversation and pressed send. I waited with bated breath for a response. She replied almost instantly. "Haha, that's a good one. Thanks, cutie." My heart skipped a beat. I messaged back right away. A little desperate, I know, but hindsight is always 20/20. She didn't seem to mind, though. Jessica and I really hit it off. I didn't understand why such an attractive girl chose to talk to me out of all people, but I crammed the thought deep in the recesses of my mind. It was really working. I was actually having a great conversation for the first time since downloading the app. After a couple days, I mustered up the courage to ask Jessica on a date. She enthusiastically agreed and we exchanged phone numbers. I called Mark to give him the good news. Okay, admittedly, I may have called him to gloat a bit over my imminent success, but that's besides the point. That's awesome, bro. See, I told you the pickup line thing would work. I have to hand it to you, man. I can't believe I'm saying this, but you were right, I admitted, much to Mark's satisfaction. Glad to be of service, kind sir, he replied in his goofiest British accent. You're a goon. She wants me to meet her at her place this Saturday. Dude, that's great. You still got a couple days to prepare, so just play it cool until then and you'll do just fine. You're right. I just hope I don't screw things up. Don't worry, man. You got this. I believe in you, Mark doted, trying to boost my confidence. I really hope you're right. That night I had one of the most vivid dreams of my life. I was alone in a dark house that I didn't recognize. The luminescent glow of the television was my only light source. I wearily stood. I felt tired. So tired. As if I was underwater with cement blocks strapped to my feet. I blearily called out into the encompassing black. Hello? Is anyone there? I didn't expect a response, so a twinge of fear and confusion pulsed through me when a soft, soothing voice emanated from deeper in the home. I'm here, baby, she sang, enticing me to follow. I moved as quickly as my heavy feet would allow, clumsily making my way to the hall. Where are you? I shouted. A figure began to emerge from a room at the far end of the hallway. It was Jessica. She looked absolutely magnificent. She was dressed in lingerie, her skimpy outfit proudly advertising her assets. Long brown hair flowed down her back, tapering off nearly halfway down. Her smile captured my heart, beautiful rows of stark white teeth gleaming back at me. Her stunning green eyes connected with mine, paralyzing me with her tantalizing gaze. She glided up to me and gently took my hand, lightly dragging me behind her. My heart pounded in my chest. Joy overtook me as we closed the distance to her room, every second mounting to the glorious crescendo that I was dying to experience. Then, right as we reached the doorway to her room, I heard an alarm clock? My eyes sprung open. Disappointment enveloped me as I realized it was just a dream, but it felt so real. Maybe it was a vision. A passing sense of delight bubbled inside me at the thought. I had the same exact dream every night that followed. Each time, Jessica and I would come so close to passing the threshold of her bedroom only for my alarm to tear me back to consciousness. It was starting to freak me out with the consistency of it all. I reasoned that because Jessica was on my mind all day, my dreams were reflecting that. I tried not to dwell on it and focus on mentally preparing myself to meet Jessica in person. The days leading up to our date were full of anxious anticipation. When the day finally came, I was a bundle of nerves. I made sure to look my best, applying extra deodorant to mask the foul stench of the nervous sweat I was certain would come. I left my house a few minutes before 8, shooting Mark a text to let him know of my departure. I pulled into the driveway and messaged Jessica to let her know that I'd arrived. She instantly replied and told me to let myself in. I thought it was a little strange that she wasn't going to greet me at the door, but I ignored the notion and timidly approached the house. Sweat began to pool above my brow as I pushed open the front door. Once I stepped inside, I froze in utter shock. It was the same house from my dreams. Everything matched, even down to the brown splotch on the carpet. Hey, I'm here, I stuttered, announcing my presence. I'm here, J-Baby. Jessica's sweet voice floated from within the house, luring me further in. I cautiously trudged into the eerily familiar hall, and there she was. She looked even more gorgeous than she had in my dreams. That long brown hair cascaded down her shoulders. Her petite frame was flawless. Her minuscule amount of clothing hung to her perfect features in a way that only worked to embellish her even further. Her smile stunned me as I stared transfixed into her glistening green eyes. She stood seductively in the doorway, beckoning me closer. My legs involuntarily drifted toward her, and in a matter of seconds, I was standing before the radiant enchantress I'd been so eager to meet. She slipped her soft palm into mine, interlacing our fingers, and pulled me into her room. She led me straight to her bed, where she adopted a promiscuous position atop the covers. Care to join me? She giggled. You know it, I replied, donning my best, sexy voice. I swiftly kicked off my shoes, discarding them at the foot of the bed. I began to approach her, but my foot clumsily caught on the corner of the bed frame, sending me crashing to the floor with a loud thump. Oh my goodness! Are you alright, sweetie? Jessica implored, alarmed at my sudden mishap. Yeah, I'm fine, I breathed, preparing to lift myself back up. Before I did so, I caught a glimpse under Jessica's bed. A shriveled, rotten corpse glowered back at me. Hollow, sullen eye sockets cold enough to bore a hole through my chest. Fear coursed through me. At least half a dozen mummified husks littered the floor. It looked as if their life force had been drained, leaving behind only an empty shell. Are you sure you're okay, hon? Mama can make you feel all better. Yeah, I just need to use the restroom real quick. I lied, shuffling to the hall as surreptitiously as I could. It's down the hall and to the left. Hurry back now, sweetie, she uttered, a tinge of impatience seeping into her words. Oh, I will. Once she was out of sight, I bolted to the front door, not caring that I left my shoes behind. I jumped into my car and floored it out of there, tires squealing as they grappled for traction. Jessica tried calling me repeatedly afterward. I blocked her number and deleted Kinder. I receive calls from random numbers occasionally, but I can't definitively say that it's her. I have a sinking feeling that I haven't seen the last of her yet, though, because every now and then I still have the same recurring dream. Only now, I always see how it ends, and I wouldn't wish that nightmare upon anyone. I'm a hunter. I like to hunt wild boar specifically. Though I have been deer hunting and have been known to get a turkey for Thanksgiving, I mostly hunt boar. For those of you that don't know, boar are a big problem in the United States. A sow can have 2 litters a year, and it's not uncommon for a litter to consist of 10 or more pigs. Given that pigs eat anything and everything, it's not hard to see why the Department of Fish and Wildlife makes it legal to hunt them with almost no restrictions. In my state, it's illegal to hunt most large mammals with night or thermal vision scopes, with the exception of boar and coyote. I've been saving for a year, mostly fun money. It's hard to explain to your wife that a scope that cost literally twice as much as the rifle I was mounting it on was worth it. But I did it. I took it to a range and sighted it in. There was an area that was peppered with boar activity that I knew would be perfect for a night hunt. It was easily accessible with my truck, with easy-to-find spots that I could set up and that overlooked a large, easy-to-navigate clearing. The night started uneventful, mostly me tinkering with my new toy, cycling through the settings. I was a little impatient. I'd spotted multiple deer, but they were out of season, and like I mentioned earlier, my current setup wasn't legal for deer. I moved to another spot I'd seen days earlier that probably wasn't much better than my first, but it gave me something to do and a new angle to look around with my new scope. After an hour or so of glassing the area, it dawned on me. This spot doesn't have much animal activity at all. No rabbits or owls. The deer that I'd seen were hundreds of yards from where I was. Why was this pocket of land so dead at night but lively in the day? I'd set up around 10 p.m. and it was about 2 a.m. when I started to think about packing up, maybe setting up a target before I left and taking some practice shots. I heard a crunch come from the direction I came from before. I panned my scope over and saw the silhouette of a small bear pushing through the bushes. It's important to note that my scope isn't exactly night vision. It's a thermal scope, kind of like a black and white version of what you see in the Predator movies. I adjusted my range and zoomed in a little. I remember jolting a little when I saw that it wasn't really a bear. It was a man. Because he was so low and hunched over, I thought I was looking at a young bear. Is that a game warden? It couldn't be. I would have seen the headlights coming up the road from where I was perched. And where could he have walked from? I was 30 miles away from anything and on public lands. I was about to call out when I adjusted my sights and noticed he was naked. No shoes, pants, or anything. I remember being disturbed by his movements like a squirrel or something, twitchy and grabbing at the foliage, sniffing around and palming the tree. Was that my tree? The one I'd been leaning against earlier? The thought terrified me. Could he smell me? Then, he did something I still have nightmares about today. He squatted and placed his hands on the dirt between his feet and stared straight up like a dog mid-howl. And I heard it, a voice coming from that direction, a very compelling female voice. Help! I'm lost! There was a long pause, but neither of us moved a muscle. The center of my sights was trained at the dirt in front of his feet. I couldn't bring myself to aim directly at another person. It went against everything I've been taught about firearms. Were they lost? Was this some guy that had gone crazy out here? Why was his voice so feminine? Help, please! I can't walk! The voice called out. That's when I called bullshit. Not only could he walk, when I first saw him, he was traversing the land with ease for a naked person. So good I mistook him for a bear. That's a trap. This guy is trying to lure me to him with a damsel in distress routine. Luckily, the lack of activity before had caused me to pack up most of my gear. I think I may have left behind a hat and a sitting pad, but I didn't give a shit in that moment. I took my eyes off him for a moment to get my pack on.
I buckled my chest strap and scrambled for my rifle. To my horror, he was in the same position, but his face was staring in my direction, and I swear I saw him smile. The thermal scope has an effect that makes animals' eyes appear white. How the hell had he heard me get up and put my gear on? He must have easily been 150 yards away. "Go away!" I screamed in that direction. He stood upright, and it hit me how tall and skinny he was, easily 6 feet and very lean. He took a couple of long strides in my direction, and I instinctively sent a round sailing above his head into the tree line. He was freaky as hell, but he hadn't really threatened me. What would I tell the cops? I was unwilling and unready to shoot someone. He stopped dead in his tracks and hunched down on all fours. "Go away!" He stayed on all fours, and this time I had my sights trained on the center of him. His eyes were just above the grass like a large cat or something. I was trying to stop my trembling and knew that my voice had cracked a little on that last warning. I was terrified. That standoff probably only lasted a minute or two, maybe less, but it felt like forever. In an instant, he bolted left towards the tree line opposite the road. So much for not being able to walk. I could barely keep him in my scope, he was moving so fast. He disappeared into the brush, and I sent another bullet sailing high in his direction. I racked another round and tried to pocket that mag and swap for a fresh one, but I dropped it and didn't bother looking for it. I wasn't far from my truck, and I wanted to get out of there. I could hear him in the distance, yelling in this weird sound that could have been a laugh or a cry. I scrambled up the trail and arrived at my truck breathless. I tossed my gear into the cab, but kept the rifle in the passenger seat and sped off. For the longest time, I told that story from the perspective of having spotted some deranged crackhead living off the land like some kind of caveman. I reported it to Fish and Game, but all they did was scold me for hunting at night alone. Never received an update. It wasn't until I told this story at a camping trip that my nephew told me about wendigos, rakes, and skinwalkers. My story scared the piss out of him because the spot we were camping was technically the same forest I'd seen the bastard, just 50 miles east of it. He was so spooked his mom, my cousin, had to take him home. She was really pissed. I've gone down the rabbit hole one of these scary stories. I'm not saying what I saw definitely was a wendigo or a skinwalker. I'm saying that if such a thing exists, I may have dodged quite the bullet that night. Or maybe it was just a tweaker being Donnie Thornberry in the middle of the night. Either way, I thought I'd share. Around a year ago, we had a new neighbor move into the vacant property next door. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, mainly filled with families and a few retirees. It was just me and my wife, Kate. We had lived there for the last 3 years after getting married. The house next door had been empty since we moved here. One morning, we noticed the moving van pull outside the house before we went to work. There was a woman standing in the driveway, directing the various removal people carrying boxes. She was possibly 35 to 40 years old, slim-build with shoulder-length brown hair. Me and my wife went over to say hello and introduce ourselves. We asked her whether she was moving here with her family. She responded stating that it was just her and her name was Melissa. She didn't seem like much of a social person, and after some awkward exchanges, we both left her to get moved in and went to work. We didn't really see her much as we both worked long hours, but it did become apparent that she didn't leave the house much. We'd only seen her a handful of times since she moved in. That was until last week. I went out to my backyard after getting back from work to get some tools out of my storage shed. I grabbed my toolkit as I had to put some shelving up. As I shut the door, something caught my eye. It was something shiny, catching the evening sunset from my neighbor's upstairs window. I gazed up. The curtain was half closed, but still exposing something that was hanging from the ceiling. I adjusted my eyes. It was Melissa. The color had drained from her pale arms and legs. It was her anklet that was catching the sun as her lifeless body swayed. I was rooted to the spot. Took a large gulp as my eyes watered in shock. Kate came out the back door after seeing my expression. She asked what was wrong. She repeated herself after I didn't respond. I stuttered the words while pointing up. The neighbor. She turned and looked up. The gasp that came from her now hand-covered mouth was as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. I composed myself for a second and said, "We need to call the police." We rushed inside. I grabbed my phone and dialed, my finger trembling with every number. I explained what we had seen, and the operator told me that the police were on their way and to stay in the house. We waited by the window for 10 to 15 minutes until we saw the glow of blue flashing lights come up the road. We met the officers outside Melissa's house. They banged on the door as we stood at the end of the driveway. Their knocks were met by nothing. They tried again while shouting, "Police, open up!" Kate, with tears running down her face, shouted over, "You need to get in and help her!" As the two officers turned round to us, the door slowly opened. Melissa appeared in the doorway. One of the officers apologized and said there was a report of a disturbance at this property. She told them she was asleep and that's why she didn't answer straight away. We were both stood, eyes wide, staring at her, thinking that this wasn't possible. We both had seen her. She was dead up there. It was definitely her. Our breathing now erratic and shallow. The officers asked whether they could come in and have a look around. She said that it was fine while pushing the door fully open. They disappeared into the house for 10 minutes as we waited, confused and questioning what we had seen. As they came out and apologized to her again while wishing her a good evening, the two cops came over to us. Kate said, "And we definitely saw her or someone dead up there." One officer said that they checked every room. There was nothing out of the ordinary. As they went back into the car, I shouted over to Melissa that we were sorry and we must have made a mistake. She gazed over to us, her face expressionless, as she closed the door. We walked back to the house in disbelief and went back to the backyard. We both looked up. Melissa was stood in the same window. She stared at us both. A sinister smile grew on her face as she slowly pulled the curtain closed. We went back inside, still freaked out on what we had experienced. Kate was still really upset, but relieved that Melissa was okay. I still couldn't make any sense of it, my mind still going back to what I had seen in the window. We went to bed exhausted. Kate fell asleep almost immediately, but me? No, I wasn't sleeping anytime soon. I heard a noise coming from outside. I checked my phone. It was 1:30. I slowly got out of bed and made my way to the window. I peered through the edge of our curtains. In the middle of her backyard, Melissa stood motionless, her head suddenly turned up to our window. I quickly pulled the curtain back. My heart was starting to race as I went to look again a second later. She was gone. I got back into bed and tried my best to think rationally about the night's events. I did eventually sleep. We woke the next morning. I didn't say anything to Kate about what I had seen. She had gone through enough that night already. We went off to work, still trying to pretend last night didn't happen. I arrived home later that evening. Kate finished work a couple of hours earlier than me. I went in and called out for her, but I was met by silence. This was strange. She would have messaged me if she went out and her car was still in the driveway. I had worked late and she should have been home hours ago. I checked all the rooms. As I was heading back downstairs, she came through the front door. I said, "Where were you?" She replied, "I went to see Melissa. You're home early." I looked at her confused. "Kate, it's 7 o'clock. I got held up at the office." She seemed taken aback. "I went over there at 5. We only had a quick chat about what happened, and I wanted to check if she was okay." I said that she must have lost track of time and asked how Melissa was. Kate said, "She was fine. It was just a misunderstanding." I was just glad that this wasn't going to be awkward going forward. The next few days were normal, as if nothing had happened. Last night, things started getting weird. We had both gone out after work to a restaurant. Around halfway through our meal, we got notifications from our video doorbell. When I opened it, Melissa was stood on our porch, her face bruised, blood coming from her nose and mouth. There was a red swollen indent around her neck. She was repeating in a hushed voice, "Help! Please! Help me!" Her eyes darted from side to side. Me and Kate looked at each other in terror as we left some cash on the table and rushed out to the car. We left the feed going as we drove. Suddenly, Kate in a panic said, "What the?" I said, "What?" She didn't answer. "Kate, what is it?" I pulled the car over. We both looked at the feed. There were two figures stood behind Melissa at the end of our driveway. They walked slowly forward towards her. As Melissa turned around, she begged them to stay away. I didn't realize at first, but as they came closer to the camera, I recognized both of them. They looked exactly like Kate and the other Melissa, but it obviously wasn't them. Kate was sat next to me, now crying hysterically, and Melissa was still there on the ground, begging seemingly for her life. The video stopped. The words, "streaming error," flashed onto the now dark screen. I said we can't go back there. Kate agreed, and we checked into a hotel on the other side of town. We didn't know what to do now. We need to go home eventually. We wanted to check on Melissa, but the fear we both have is stopping us. We are both deciding whether to go back later today. The video has not gone back on since. I will post an update once we have figured stuff out. I hope you can understand our reluctancies to return. It was Tuesday. Nothing special about it, just a day in August, like hundreds of Tuesdays before. I was coming back from work and my neighbor Marge greeted me with a wave and a smile. She was sitting in a folding chair on the lawn in front of her house. I waved back at her and asked how she was. "Pretty fine, thank you, Jim. The junior started kicking me already," she said, stroking her belly protruding above the sweatpants. "I bet he's gonna be as energetic as his dad," I said with a smile, and on that note we nodded at each other, as in, "It was nice seeing you." Later that evening I ran out of cigarettes and went to a nearby store to get some. Surprisingly, Marge was still there, sitting in the chair. She must have dozed off or something. I hope Tim won't forget about her, as even though the days were still warm, the nights started to get a bit chilly already. On my way back, I checked again. Her husband was by her and they were discussing something, so I decided to pass by without dragging any attention. The next morning I woke up late, as I worked 2 to 2 shifts. I could afford the luxury of sleeping till noon. Marge was there again. This time she had a coffee table and a jug of lemon water by her side. She was reading a book, nothing special. I just registered this as I was making my coffee. And I would never pay attention to anything like that, because why would I? But at some point, it went out of the boundaries of being normal. It was a week after she started to take her sun baths, or fresh air sessions, or whatever she was doing. I woke up in the middle of the night for, biological reasons, and something made me look outside the window. She was there. The clock showed 3:23, but my neighbor was sitting in that chair, covered with a blanket, sleeping. I don't understand modern parenting and all those natural things where a woman is supposed to give birth in a bathtub, but who am I to judge? Maybe it was something new and trendy, good for immunity, So I got impressed, a bit concerned, and forgot about it. Soon it became a routine. Seeing her there in that folding chair every day. It seemed that the belly grew bigger and bigger with every week passing, and I'm no expert, but something told me that the day is coming soon. September came and quickly climbed to its middle. The leaves started to fall, the rains were fierce, nothing would stop her. A rain poncho, an umbrella, I saw a couple of solutions implemented. She just smiled at me and waved her hand, sometimes accompanied by her husband. The temperature dropped drastically in the following days, but those weirdos didn't stop doing whatever that was. I'm a regular man, so I don't stick my nose into other people's business, but this became more and more strange. I approached them a couple of times, having a small chat and asking how it's going. Aren't they concerned Marge would get cold? Wouldn't that harm the baby? But they just laughed it off, saying they have a simple answer for any situation. I noticed that Marge's abdomen became quite large. I can even say that the size of it was remarkably huge. I saw a couple of pregnant women in the final weeks of their terms, but this... I thought it was impolite to ask if they were expecting twins, so I didn't even bother. Finally, October arrived and my lunatic neighbors didn't care about it. Even when the withered grass around started to cover with early frost, she kept sitting there. Do you know what's the weirdest thing about it? Nobody hinged a brow. Other people on the street brought her treats and stopped by to have a chat. Not a single person thought that was something out of hand. One morning something happened. A tent, to be specific. That husband of hers put up a tent around her. The tarpaulin one, like they use for hot dog stalls on fairs. And he was kind enough to put a heater in there. Or so I guessed, looking at the electrical cord reaching out of the window of their living room. I caught Tim walking from the grocery store with 2 large paper bags of food in his hands. "Hey man, I don't want to be that guy, but are you sure everything's fine with Marge?" I asked. "It just seems a bit too exotic for me. It's getting really cold outside. Are you sure it's safe?" "Yes, no need to worry. She's feeling perfectly fine. Thank you for asking," he replied. I couldn't but notice how pale he is. He tried to hide the dark circles around his eyes with a smile, but that was impossible not to notice how exhausted he became. What if that was a hysteria of some sort? I mean, young parents have a whole bunch of problems that can result in nasty things, like postnatal depression, for example. I had no clue what should I do in this situation, so I did the thing I was best at. Nothing. Days passed and I haven't seen Marge for 2 weeks or so, as she was hidden inside the tent. Just him running back and forth, carrying loads of food, hot drinks in thermos, books, some medication, or whatever. Once I noticed that the tent walls were moving back and forth as if that crazy woman was stretching in there, or maybe her husband was giving her a massage. It was weird, but weirder came next. The moaning. I woke up to her moaning in the tent. Immediately I rushed to check out if everything was okay and if I should call an ambulance, but Tim, who was standing by the entrance of the tent, said it was alright. The baby was on its way and it was completely normal. Muscle cramps and back pains. No worries, Jim. I am with her 24/7, he said. But the moaning never stopped, as if she never got a moment of relief. They became constant. My job became my new home, so that I could avoid those horrible sounds echoing around our peaceful neighborhood. They were getting under my skin and I couldn't get to sleep. The earplugs didn't help much, as even with the ears plugged, I just knew those psychos were still there. The true horror was revealed yesterday. The wind was especially strong and some of the tent pegs just didn't hold. Tim was probably sleeping, exhausted, so he couldn't react quickly. I have no better explanation. But the side of the tent opened aside. Clearly the poor woman needed some help. No blanket or windbreaker could save her from harsh weather, especially in her condition. So being the good neighbor I am, I walked straight to the falling tent and asked, "Hey Marge, you need a hand with the tent?" Only the moans were the answer to my suggestion. Standing there without a proper answer and not the slightest clue if she was okay or not, I decided to act. Grabbed the side of the tent fabric, pulled, and... Your hair turning gray in mere seconds is a popular myth. Uncontrollable urination is not. The vision of the tent's insides paralyzed me. I was standing there with my mouth open and my eyes refusing to register the thing before me. It was still dark outside and I could just take a peek through a gap, but that was enough to traumatize me for the rest of my days. Marge was not there, at least not the Marge I would expect to see. A huge bubble of flesh covered with horrible stretch marks lay before me. I couldn't see the whole picture, but the thing was huge. It was wobbling like a bowl of jello and the motion was accompanied by unbearable moans and the putrid smell of something rotten. The stink hit my nostrils and the tears covered my eyes instantly. I couldn't bear another moment of looking at it, so I ran. I didn't think straight. I just wanted to get the fuck away from there. The further, the better. I ran to my friend's house on the other side of our town. Didn't give them a proper explanation and called the police. Do you know what they told me? "Sir, do you have a kink for peeping after pregnant females? Tim keeps calling and sending messages. What the hell is going on? I have no idea what I'm going to do. All my life is left in that house and I don't have the guts to show up there. My credit cards, my papers, everything. That thing." I nearly smashed my phone as I took the last drop of bravery and checked one of the messages from Tim. It said, "Hey, it happened! Baby Tim Jr. is born! Jim, we want you to be the godfather. After all that we went through, we just won't take no for an answer." Smiley face. I'm a businessman that regularly commutes by train between Warsaw and Moscow. I could fly, but I found that taking an overnight train allows me to do far more work while traveling. If you factor in the cost of a night in a hotel, it costs about the same as a flight. I hopped aboard a train departing Warsaw in the early afternoon. I always book my sleeping car to be the last car on the train so that I can watch the country fly by as the train moves. I started working on my laptop, occasionally looking up to stare out the window that spanned the back of the car. The sun began to set as the train wound up into the mountains. Soon, the thick forests on either side of the train were covered in a few feet of snow that reflected the red light of the setting sun. I was starting to get hungry, so I closed my laptop and made my way to the dining car. It was empty except for a single mother and her 4 or 5-year-old daughter. They were sitting at a table in the middle of the car. I took a seat at a table and soon a young Russian waitress came by with a menu. I looked over the selection of drinks and the 3 entrees that were serving. I ordered a scotch and steak, then turned to stare out the window at the trees whizzing by outside. The sun had set, so it was easy to see the reflection of the dining car through the window. The young girl was staring at me through the window's reflection. I made a face, raising my eyebrows and sticking out my tongue. She gave me an extremely concerned expression and tugged at her mother. Her mom turned around and shook her head. "Sorry," she said. "Lena is always staring at strangers. I'm Amelia." "No problem," I said. "I'm Jacob. I've got a niece her age back in Warsaw." We continued to chat as the waitress brought back my meal. I just started to eat when the girl began shrieking. Her mom jerked, staring down at her girl. She'd shielded her eyes with her hands and was continuing to scream at the top of her lungs. "Lena," she said. "Lena, what is it? What happened?" It took her a few minutes to calm down, but she refused to pull her hands from her eyes. Out the window," she said between her sobs. We looked out the window at the trees whizzing by. I almost didn't see it. There was a handprint on the frost that had built up on the window. I stood up and wiped at the glass, expecting it to slide off. That's when I realized that all the frost was on the outside of the car. Amelia stood up, pulling her daughter away. "I think she should get some rest," she said. "Of course. I'm sure she'll be fine," I said, still shaken. I forced down the rest of my meal in silence, ordering another scotch before heading back towards my room at the back of the train. The train had entered quiet hours, so most of the lights in the hallway had been dimmed to their lowest setting to help people sleep. I was just a car away from my room when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the roof of the train right above me. Whoever was on the roof had a noticeably strange gait. The sounds moved back down the train, towards my room. I reached the end of the car and paused with my hand on the door. Something about the sound, something about that child's scream, something about how dark the forest had looked out the window gave me pause. Then I turned the handle and walked into my room. A humanoid creature with no mouth was hanging outside my window, staring into my room. It was pale white and had long claws coming from each finger. Its eyes were staring directly at me with a hungry expression. I threw my hands over my face and my knees buckled. When I came back to myself, I realized that I was on the floor, screaming and still covering my eyes. Several concerned passengers were crowded around me. I couldn't bear to look back out the window. I didn't sleep that night. I've been having a hard time sleeping ever since. If you're ever on a midnight train to Moscow, don't look out the windows. I know everyone has a weird COVID story because that was all sorts of messed up, but I think I have one to tell. This is a lot stranger and scarier than most. It involved pizza delivery in a case of what I thought was mistaken identity. I know that sounds harmless, but actually, this was far more dangerous than anything I have ever dealt with before or since. It was about the middle of the pandemic, and my two roommates both lost their jobs because of the constant lockdown we faced where we lived. Keeping a job was difficult if you weren't an essential worker, and that meant my job at the hospital was the only one keeping all of us afloat. Me being the only one who was still making money, I immediately felt like I had the whole world against me because there were bills piling up, and neither of the two guys I stayed with could cook if their life depended on it. That's how we wound up getting pizza. Greg suggested we order it, and since I usually work long shifts and needed to spare as much time as I could for sleeping and studying, I agreed to it. Unfortunately for us, the closest delivery driver was about an hour away, meaning that even if we did want to get food from anywhere, the chances of it being hot were slim. Andy, the other guy, suggested we give it a try anyway. Anything better than my cooking, right? I couldn't argue with that. So we ordered and requested that the food remain sealed until it arrived. We ordered some salad, some breadsticks, and a Supreme. Nothing major. Then we had to wait. Honestly, I have always noticed that it takes longer for food to come when you are hungry, and this was no exception. I just wanted to get something to eat, and it felt like every minute was taking longer than the last. When the driver did come, I didn't even thank him. I was too focused on my meal. I wanted to chow down immediately, so I opened the door, paid him, and got back inside our duplex. That was when I opened the contents of the bag and realized this wasn't our food. It wasn't even actual food. It looked like an animal body part. As soon as I smelled it, I dropped the bag and actually shouted in disgust. Greg laughed, but Andy was pretty upset. He called out to the driver as he was getting ready to leave. This guy was pretty tall, pretty muscular, and the second that Andy cursed at him, I knew we were in trouble. He stood up and gave us this ugly look, like he wanted to rip us to shreds, and I told Andy to get inside. The delivery driver got close and started to bang on the door just as Andy got inside. "What were you thinking?" I asked. The driver kept banging on the door, and the driver didn't seem to be leaving anytime soon. "How was I supposed to know it was the Hulk?" Andy asked nervously. "Call the cops," I told Greg. "You do it. This guy might be a psychopath," he told me. I made the call as we heard our unexpected guest make a louder noise. The operator had to ask the usual questions. What was the nature of my emergency and all that? And did anyone in the household have COVID? I don't know why I said yes. I think I was just scared by the thug outside my house. And now I wasn't sure what was going to happen with him getting angrier by the second. "Sir, we will get units out, but if this is not related to COVID directly and you are infected, it may take time to find units." I knew that meant because the cops thought they would get infected, they put us at the bottom of their priority list. I tried my best to not panic as I heard the driver start chunking things at our place. I told them thank you and then went to the door where the driver was now just sitting on our front porch, waiting for us, I guess. His back to us, and I realized he probably wasn't leaving anytime soon. "What do you want from us?" I bravely asked. He got up and slammed his fist into the door like it actually went through the wood. Andy screamed and Greg actually laughed. I think it was nerves because I wasn't sure why he thought this was all some kind of joke. "Here, take our money. Take all of it," I said, hurriedly shoving my wallet through the hole that the driver had just made. He grabbed it and then said a few more threatening words before running to his car. "We need to report his ass," Andy said. His voice sounded shaky like he was about to shit himself. I told them we shouldn't because I didn't want that guy to come back and do us any actual harm. Later that night, I found out that Greg had actually reported the driver, but then he told me something that made me sick and wondered what the hell we had dealt with. The pizza place told us that they hadn't actually sent a driver out to our area because they were so backed up, meaning whoever had decided to come and drop off that dead animal wasn't even supposed to be there. So where had the driver come from? None of us thought much about it for a few nights. I didn't want to admit that I was scared to order from there again, so I decided the next time we wanted food to use a different food delivery service. Greg said that he would help cover the cost, so I got a little fancy and asked for 2 large pepperoni. The delivery service claimed food would be there in 30 minutes. It got there in 20 minutes. This time, when I opened the door to accept it, I immediately recognized the driver. He had come back. That seemed impossible, but he was standing there holding the bag and glaring at the 3 of us like we were his next target. Then he pulled the bag back toward himself and revealed he was holding a gun. He ordered us all inside and told us to give our phones immediately. Andy was hesitant to give in, and the attacker shot him in the foot. As he fell to the ground, I hastily complied with the psychopath as he entered our apartment and started to pilfer our stuff. Andy, Greg, and I stood there feeling like we were about to die. I begged the attacker to at least let me treat Andy's foot. The tall man grunted an affirmative as he grabbed stuff, waving the gun absently as he stole anything valuable he could find. As I wrapped up Andy's foot, Greg leaned close to us and whispered that he was going to try and jump the guy. I thought that was an awful idea, but once he made his mind up, I couldn't convince him to stop. Greg waited until the attacker had his back turned and then jumped, wrapping his arms around the man's neck. The 2 of them turned around and fell into the television, and I jumped for the gun. With the weapon in hand, I managed to bravely get the assailant to leave. He ran to his car, and I thought that was the end of it. Then we heard the rev of an engine, and we saw he was preparing to ram his vehicle into our apartment. All of us scrambled out of the way as the guy smashed the car. We hid in the bedroom, and the vehicle slammed through the front glass window. He grabbed the bag of stolen goods and then drove off. I called an ambulance for Andy after running to a neighbor who heard the crash. On the way to the hospital, we filed a police report, took an inventory of what was stolen. As we were listing everything off, it suddenly occurred to me that Greg didn't have anything stolen. Then, a sickening thought hit me as I recalled how unconcerned Greg had been about the situation, as if he knew that the attacker wouldn't hurt him. I confronted him with what I suspected. "You knew that guy. You never ordered the food. You wanted him to come scare us. What I don't understand is why," I said in frustration. Andy was going to be disabled because of his psycho friend. Greg didn't even deny it. It was going to be an insurance scheme. I put us under some good paying contracts for rental insurance, but I knew it would only work if you guys didn't know. And I didn't know he was going to go that damn far. It got out of hand, he admitted. I was appalled by his behavior and reported him to the landlord the same day. Andy and I found a different roommate and managed to survive the pandemic through the skin of our teeth. I don't know where Greg and his friend are now, and I don't want to know. I just know that I'm also cooking here at home just in case.
This happened quite a while ago when I was home alone with just my dog. After all this time, I'm sure what happened was really strange, and I have no idea what this man actually wanted. So I was watching TV one night at about 11 p.m. when I heard a car pull up outside and the engine shut off. I figured it was obviously a neighbor, but nosy dog wanted to have a look and went to the window. He'd kinda messed up the blinds when he went to look, so I got up to fix them. When I did, I noticed a car parked on the street across from my house and my neighbor's house. I couldn't really make out any details, but it looked like the driver was still sitting in the car. I didn't really think anything of it. I got a drink and went back to watching TV. Quite a while had passed since I fixed the blinds, but I'm not sure how long. I'd guess 15 to 20 minutes. Out of nowhere, I thought I heard a tapping at the door. Not a knock. It was much lighter and very quiet. My dog had set up to look at the door, and I paused the TV when the same tapping then started on the window. I opened the blinds a little and saw a man standing there. I couldn't make out his face properly, and he immediately walked back to the door and started tapping at it again. This doesn't sound very frightening, and I'm not sure why, but I suddenly had a really awful feeling. I felt absolutely terrified and had no idea why. The tapping at the door never stopped, but something in my head was saying if I opened the door to him, then something really bad would happen. I went upstairs to open a window to ask what he wanted. It felt safer doing this. He said in a really quiet voice he was delivering pizza and told me how much it cost. I felt so stupid for being frightened and told him I didn't order pizza. I guessed he was speaking quietly and knocking lightly so he didn't disturb my neighbors. My dog had followed me upstairs and was letting out the odd growl and bark, which isn't really unusual for him. I was trying to shush him when the man downstairs told me he had the correct address and I'd better get downstairs now and open the door to pay what I owed and collect my food before it got cold. I was really confused because I most definitely didn't order any food and began telling him that again when I noticed he didn't have a pizza. He wasn't carrying anything at all. I told him again that he had the wrong address and he got really angry. He kept telling me to open the door. He was going between angry and sort of trying to persuade me to go back downstairs. I asked him where the pizza was. He said he had a hold of it. It was really dark, but he definitely didn't have anything in his hands. My dog was really making quite a bit of fuss at this point, and the stranger had turned into a broken record. Come downstairs, open the door. Come downstairs and open the door. All the noise must have alerted my neighbor, who did open his front door, and the man didn't say a word but practically ran across the street to the car that I had heard pull up a while ago. He went back to the car empty-handed. I have no idea what he wanted, but he certainly wasn't a delivery driver. It really freaked me out as well that my dog is quite obviously a large breed and the man saw him through the window. He wasn't deterred at all. It seems even stranger and less random that he actually drove to my house as though he'd planned on showing up. I've been working as a private investigator for 6 years now. You may have some crazy ideas about that, but it's far less glamorous than what you might think. Most of my work involves following around unfaithful spouses or doing research into political candidates for their opponents. It's not what I was hoping for when I got my journalism degree, but it pays the bills, I guess. Living here in Chicago, it's hard to ask for more than that. A few days back, I was sitting in a coffee shop waiting for a client to arrive. He'd called me that morning sounding desperate. I was happy about that. Desperate clients are usually prepared to pay more. My client arrived a few minutes later, looking around nervously. He was in his late 20s and dressed fairly casually, but his watch and his shoes told me that he came from money. "Thanks for meeting with me," he said. "I'm Colin Westwood, and I need your help." I motioned for him to sit down and asked him what I could do for him.
"My father," he said. "He's been missing for 5 whole days now, but the police told me that they don't even have an investigator on his case. It's not like him to disappear like this, and I'm worried about him." I sat back in my chair. I'd never done a missing persons case before. "This kind of thing falls a little out of my expertise," I said. "I don't care," he nearly shouted. "Listen, I've done my research, and you are the guy that a family friend pointed me toward." He rubbed his forehead. "I can't trust just anybody with this. I'll pay you extra for your trouble, I promise." I thought it over and decided to take the case. It'd be a good experience, and earning favors with the upper crust of this city might come in handy someday. I headed home to my office and did some research. Colin sent me his father's files, and I spent the better part of the afternoon and evening looking through them. Colin's father was a self-made millionaire who owned several factories in the industrial district here in Chicago. I also saw that he made an offer on a building in an older area of the city. I decided to go for a drive to clear my head and think. I'm a fan of night drives, especially through the city. There's not much better than the feeling you get when you drive alone at night, or see a city skyline at dusk with wind on your face. Anyway, I found myself driving to this property. I'm not an idiot, so I was keeping an eye out all around me for anyone who might want to jump me. The factory was old, one of the older ones I'd ever seen. That's when I saw a blur of motion in the door mirror on the right side of my car. My back right window was smashed and the inside of my car was littered with the explosion of safety glass. I looked back to see who was attacking my car but saw nothing. I hit the gas and sped away, still looking backwards. The street was well lit, and there was nowhere to hide, but I saw no one in the street. When I looked forward again, my eye was drawn to my rearview mirror. It revealed a man standing motionless in the street, staring at me. The man looked badly burned. I sped back to my apartment, shaken. I did some research that night and saw that the factory had been a host to dozens of accidents and disasters over the years. Still, I thought that was the case for most old factories in Chicago. I told myself it must have been a crazy homeless guy, nothing more. When I only saw him in my mirrors, I didn't know. The next morning I called Colin and told him that I was going to go into the factory. "I'm coming with you," he said. I was secretly glad. The idea of exploring the place alone, even during the day, didn't appeal to me. I met Colin in the front of the factory that morning and we made our way in. It was decrepit. It looked like it hadn't been used for at least a decade. "Look at the walls here," Colin said. "There's soot everywhere." It was true. Black soot stained the brick of the walls. We walked into the back of the building and I forced the door open. I jumped back and cursed under my breath. Colin peered forward and let out a slow breath. Well, you don't see that every day. It was a circular stairway that curved down for as far as I could see. Colin knelt down and picked up something off the ground. His hand clenched tight. "We have to go down there," he said. "Are you crazy? We'd die," I said. He held out his hand to me, revealing a small pen flashlight. "This was on the ground there. It's my dad's light. He never leaves home without it. If this is here, he must be down there." I stared at the light, then Colin, and finally shrugged. "If you want to go down there, be my guest." Colin flipped on the light and started his way down the stairs. They were far sturdier than I had thought, and didn't make so much as a creak as he made his way down them. I stayed up top for a moment, but finally gave in and used my phone's light as I made my way after him. There was a corridor at the bottom of the stairs that led out further. I found a switch and flipped it, and flickers of light appeared every 30 feet or so. As we walked down the hallway, a layer of water appeared. It was just a few inches deep, but it reeked of mold and mildew. Colin brought his sleeve to his face, trying in vain to breathe through it. "Okay, maybe we should come back with more..." He trailed off as his eyes caught on something. I followed his gaze and saw what he'd been looking at. A foot and part of a leg were sticking out of a room down the corridor. We ran for it and turned the corner. It was Colin's father. He'd been dead for several days at least. Colin was in disbelief. "No," he said, almost a whisper. That's when I heard the sound of splashing water echo from down the hallway. My mind flashed to the night before, and I stepped away from Colin. I heard another splash and saw a wave of water appear some 30 feet in front of me, as if someone had thrown a rock into the murky water. I pulled out my phone and took a picture, and that's when I realized what I was seeing. The area was well illuminated by the flickering lights, but I saw nothing in there. But when I looked down to the water, I saw the burned man from the night before staring at me in the water's reflection. "Colin," I said, my voice strained. "We need to go. Now." Colin walked into the hallway, half in a daze. "What's going on?" Then he saw the reflection too. "What is—" The water splashed again, and I saw him staring at the man reflected in the water. The burned man started walking towards us. We both turned and ran for the stairs, almost falling in the water. We heard the sound of splashing behind us, but it stopped when we reached the top of the stairs and slammed the door behind us. We made it out of the factory and to our cars. We drove until we were nearly on the other side of the city. I called the police when I finally stopped. Their full investigation ruled that Colin's father had been strangled to death. I don't know what to think. If I learn anything else, I'll update you all here.